Hey guys, and welcome back to Dojo. We are in week 3, and this week we talked about having confidence, which means that when we are obedient to God, we can trust that He will be with us no matter what. Will you guys go ahead and check out this story?
In the book of Judges, chapters 6 and 7, we find Gideon and his people, the Israelites, under the rule of a people called the Midianites. And they had been under their rule for 7 years. Now, the Midianites, they were a cruel bunch. They would come in and steal all of the Israelites' food. They would destroy their possessions, and sometimes they would even take their children. Whenever the Midianites would come around, the people of Israel would literally run into the mountains and hide in caves just to get away. Well, one day, Gideon was hiding from the Midianites, and he was threshing some wheat so he could have something to eat. And as he was doing this, he was approached by an angel of the Lord. And the angel said to Gideon,
"Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Go with the strength you have and rescue the Israelites from the Midianites. I am sending you."
Now, the Bible says that Gideon was part of a family that was the weakest in all of Israel, and that Gideon was the weakest in that family. So you could probably imagine that Gideon didn't have a whole lot of confidence that he could be the one to lead Israel to overtake the Midianites. I mean, the Midianites had beat up and bullied the Israelites for the last 7 years. But you know what? Gideon wasn't seeing the full picture. What he didn't understand was that with God, all things are possible. And with God on his side, he could have all the confidence in the world. Now, let's jump to later in the story. Once again, we find Gideon. But now, he's decided to take charge of the army of Israel. And he set out with 32,000 men to rescue his people from the Midianite army. Now, 32,000 men may seem like a lot of people, but the Midianite army, the group that they were fighting, had so many soldiers they couldn't even count them all. The Bible says there were so many that they were like grains of sand on a seashore. Wow, this was going to be tough. Well, just before Gideon was ready to go and fight, God came to him and said that 32,000 men were too many to go up against the huge army of the enemy. So God had Gideon tell the men that if any of them were afraid or timid, they could leave. And do you know how many left? 22,000. Just like that, Gideon's army went from 32,000 down to 10,000. Gideon was going to have to face an army that was so big it couldn't even be counted with only 10,000 soldiers. Wow, God was going to have to perform a big miracle if they were going to win this battle. But you know what? God still wasn't finished. God told Gideon that 10,000 was still too many. So God told Gideon to take all the men down to the water to get a drink. And when they did, to divide the men into 2 groups. In one group, he was to put all the men who cupped their hands in the water and brought it up to their mouths to drink. In the other group, he was to put all the men who knelt down and drank with their mouths directly from the stream. Well, 300 men cupped their hands in the water to drink, and everyone else drank with their mouths directly out of the stream. So, one group had 300, and one group had 9,700. Guess which group God told Gideon to go with? You got it. The Lord told Gideon,
"With these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home."
Home? Send 9,700 more men home? I mean, that's crazy. But you know what? Gideon did what God told him to do. And he kept only 300 men for his army to go and fight the Midianites. And so, at midnight, The 300 men, each one only armed with a ram's horn, a clay jar, and a torch, surrounded the enormous Midianite army. Then Gideon gave the signal. And when he did, they all jumped up, smashed their jars, blew their horns, held up their torches, and they all began to shout,
"A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!"
And that's when it happened. God caused the Midianite army to go into a panic. I mean, they became so frazzled that they began to fight each other. And those who didn't fight simply ran away. Can you believe it? God had performed a miracle. Without even using a single sword, God gave the victory to Gideon and his little army of 300 men. Well, after that, I'll bet Gideon was glad that he had the confidence that God would come through for him. And boy, did God ever come through.
Also, don't forget, we have promotion weekend coming up, which means that if your kid is in 2nd grade going into 3rd grade, they will be entering Elevate. And if your kid is in 5th grade entering 6th grade this year, they will be moving up to the garage. And that'll be in the first weekend of June. Also, that weekend is a water weekend, so make sure that you guys come prepared to get wet. One more thing, Kung Fu Panda 2, we will be seeing it on May 29th. Keep checking out the announcements on this page, and we will keep you updated with the time. Awesome. We'll see you guys next weekend.